This is Bruce Johnson with TekStream. I'm joined by our partners at Splunk and CrowdStrike, Chris Vasquez, who's a senior sales engineer with Splunk, and Roger Diaz, who's a solution architect over at CrowdStrike. These represent kind of our principal partners within the TekStream MDR solution. And the purpose of our discussion today is really to talk a little bit about kind of the triple play. We've done this series before to the CrowdStrike user group. And so we're leveraging it across really the ecosystem for TekStream and potentially Splunk as well to kind of show how these tools interoperate and why they're absolutely critical at the core of any managed security services play or managed detection and response program. So with that, let me jump into a high-level agenda and we'll discuss a little bit about why these components are important to operate together to cover as much threat surface as possible with a small amount of tools. So we'll talk a little bit about challenges. We'll talk a little bit, jump into obviously endpoint detection and response with CrowdStrike as they're the leader in that space. We'll talk about Splunk as a SIEM, and then finally the TekStream kind of MDR solution that couples those together. And we'll actually show a demo to see the interoperation of threats that are surfaced within the CrowdStrike environment and responded to, as well as the broader threat detection response inherent in SIEM environment, and then we'll wrap it up. The principal challenge, everyone has their own kind of the threat is only growing and we're not sleeping slide. That's mine. The principal thing that I like to point out is that statistic of 25 to 49 different tools. That seems to be proliferating, and although Splunk has been used to potentially reduce the number of tools being relied upon, it's not always the case. But what is absolutely true and is kind of the initial discussion that you'll have with anyone talking about a SIEM is a day in the life of a security analyst. When you have a threat, what is the process that you follow to triage and remediate that threat? And typically it's a swivel chair problem, right? So you're going to go to your EDR tool, you're going to maybe go to your firewall, you're going to go to your LDAP or start to run searches. And out of the box, one of the more important characteristics of a SIEM is that it solves a swivel chair problem. So Splunk is absolutely, king of the hill when it comes to ingesting really large amounts of data, correlating that data, and doing so in a very flexible manner that allows you to look at every tier and ask any question over any time scale from any data. So that's fundamentally why we leverage some of these tools in the way that we do, is we want to be able to solve the swivel chair problem first and foremost. So today's threats drive the need for internally focused response, and today, we're all dealing with yet another challenge with Apache Log4j across all of our customer base, and being able to use these tools extemporaneously to apply them to really any threat is pretty key. Obviously, we know it's not getting a lot better, but when you're using tools for automated incident response, and CrowdStrike is absolutely sine qua non in terms of being able to detect and respond to an endpoint attack in very sophisticated and unique ways, which, the same being true with the combination of SIEM and SOAR in the Splunk world. So our focus by and large is getting as much automation out of these platforms as we can and increasing the fidelity. We'll talk a little bit more about kind of how we measure that later. So Splunk named us Partner of the Year for this year from a services perspective, both domestically and globally. We feel that that distinction carries over into our MDR solution. We are at the forefront of white labeling as Splunk consultants, and we are, outsourcing some of their core services for on-demand services. It qualifies us to understand what the latest capability of their platform is, and the same is true, of course, of our growing ability on the CrowdStrike platform. Given the fact that originally CrowdStrike had some similarities, was leveraging some of the Splunk platform, there's a great deal of overlap in terms of how the events are surfaced at that level. So we feel that being the Splunk platform is evolving in terms of how it's handling threats pretty dramatically over the past year. And we're kind of proud of that distinction. And certainly we want to roll in all of the capabilities that Splunk platform allows. We're a cloud-first solution. We're best-in-class endpoint protection and response. Our people are now trained in CrowdStrike, and the majority of our customers are leveraging CrowdStrike as their EDR solution. And the overlap is fantastic. It's just really, really complementary. For us, the ability to use that fidelity and automation that CrowdStrike brings with it, it makes everyone feel a good bit more secure, and it certainly reduces the number of hours for our level 1 response. Well worth the investment, both of these tools. We focus on closed loop operations, meaning when you look at the OODA loop, it's not enough to detect, it's also important to respond. We feel that the combination of SIEM and SOAR allows for the automation that is similar on a SIEM level to what CrowdStrike brings out of the box. The closed loop operation simply means that you're able to observe, orient, decide, and act, and that acting is as critical as detecting. So most of our work is automated in playbooks. We rely heavily upon the SOAR automation for the SIEM piece in order to respond to events. The way in which alerts and events are handled now within Splunk has changed. So anyone that built kind of an MDR platform on top of Splunk, 4 or 5 years ago, really is in need of changing their approach given the new kinds of techniques to surfacing alerts or threats. And our approach is very collaborative with customers. We have really, although we're Splunk Cloud first, we have customers that are on-prem and or in AWS. The platform for us is irrelevant except for the fact that if you're in AWS or if you're leveraging our TekStream solution, we would administer those AWS environments, and we provide managed services outside of managed security services to a number of different customers, very large customers in some cases that need us to administer their Splunk environment as kind of just Splunk experts, if you will, on the administration of both AWS, because we do have an AWS team here, as well as Splunk. So with that, I will turn it over to Roger to tell us why CrowdStrike is consistently a leader in the Gartner quadrants. Roger, can you walk us through what makes your solution so compelling?
Thanks a lot there, Bruce. Appreciate that. As you stated, my name is Roger. I'll be discussing the whole CrowdStrike premise and what we're going to be helping TekStream, as well as working with our partner Splunk to go ahead and get all this functioning together as one holistic system. Right? So what is CrowdStrike going to be providing on top of what TekStream and Splunk are already doing? We're going to be using a couple of things, and we have some snippets here that kind of explain that. First and foremost, improvement on protection. Overall, we've been able to protect old attacks, new attacks, and even future-based attacks that haven't even been released that end up being your zero-day threats. CrowdStrike has already proven to be able to defend all its customers against many attacks around the world. One of the most harming attacks that we see is a lateral movement. How fast can somebody move around our system, infect it, and do the same thing over and over and over again? For that reason, we are making sure that we highlight those features in the demonstration at a later time. So that is how we will first and foremost improve your protection. Reducing complexity. Now this is a little bit simple here, right? For CrowdStrike, we are one simple sensor. There's not many things else that need to be done on your end aside from having an account. From there, CrowdStrike picks up that heavy workload. So instead of you having to do it on-prem, instead of you having to manage it, unless you having to make sure everything is connected and sending the data appropriately, CrowdStrike will be already addressing that on our end, sending that information to our partners around the globe so that they can better protect you and give you more pivotal information. All this is being done with our end, nothing on your end. So again, alleviates that workload and it reduces the complexity of you having to do more in your side of things. Gain embedded expertise. How can we explain that? But we will be able to be doing that with a couple of different reasons, right? We'll have TekStream on your side, again, Splunk on the other, but we will also, on the CrowdStrike end of things, we'll be adding extra layers of protection. Our Overwatch threat team will be there to go ahead and analyze, and we'll be able to help out our partners to identify more malicious threats. This gives you the opportunity to understand those potential threats that could be out there in the world today. Get immediate value. As we said, it's an installation. Essentially, you install the system, it will be running. It will be protecting you. It will automatically be picking up things. Hopefully there's nothing already in your system, but if there is, that's what we're there for. We're there to help you clean it up. We're there to give you updates. We're there to give you information in your environment that you might have not already known. And don't take my word for it. This isn't just what we have in the slide here. We do a lot of public testing across the world, product reviews and testing. We are this global standard on EDR and AV protection by the industry. You see plenty of reviews out there on the internet. We have peer-to-peer insights, awards and recognitions around the globe. Large-scale conglomerates are working with us. A lot of partners are going with us. And if there is for one main reason, we are the best in next-gen AV. We are the best one in EDR services as well. This is how we are able to provide better protection, better visibility, and as well gain all these awards and recognitions. It's why we are growing at such a rapid pace, and it's why we will continue to grow at such a rapid pace, given how well we are being recognized around the globe. These recognitions are not just on one simple thing that we have accomplished. There is a multitude of products that are included in the CrowdStrike platform. As you can see, there's going to be quite a bit of them. We will not identify each and every single one of them, as there is a lot to it, but we're going to break it down by sections. First, cloud security. We'll be able to analyze your environment all through cloud-based systems. But if you, on the other hand, are working, let's say, with AWS, Azure, GCP, we will be able to identify information that we can gather from there. We will know the settings that may have a vulnerability, may need to assess the situation, maybe make some changes on those virtual machines. We may also need to do anything else that might prevent a malicious action on these cloud-based systems. And again, we're also cloud-based, so cloud security. Keeping it simple, taking out that workload from you, no resources on your end, everything is done on the back end, instant gratification once you have it installed on your system. Security and IT operations. What does that mean? Security workload, your environment may not know what you have in your system. This is why we have things to go ahead and monitor all your assets, your applications, give you versions of said applications, and identify those situations. If we need to do anything such as vulnerability assessment around your environment to understand what is happening, what patches are we missing, what are some applications that are missing some patches, what are some operating systems that may need to be updated. Here's a list. Here's what's high, here's what's critical. Let's get to work on those. TekStream will be able to identify those situations and be able to help you immediately with that. Managed services, if that's ever needed, that means your threat hunting team that we're discussing earlier, that Overwatch team, that threat hunting management team that will be looking at their environment, saying, hey, we found these potential threats. While yes, we are doing great out there in the world, the reality is threat hunters are still needed in today's age. Nothing is 100%. Not even CrowdStrike. That's why we add Overwatch to get it as close to 100% protection as we can possibly be. Endpoint security. That is going to be your bread and butter. That is going to be all your automations from things such as your EDR, which is the raw data, telemetry data that we're gathering for every single one of your systems across the globe. From your next-gen antivirus, which is the way that we protect you, the way that we identify, the way that we are able to alert you and give you any type of information that you may need. Firewall management for any of your Windows operating systems. And of course, even device control. If you're worried about USBs or anything of that nature, we'll be able to protect you on that. We'll be recording the data for you so you know what is being transferred through these devices and what is being blocked and what is being allowed in your system. Identity protection is one of our newer models, but one of our greater ones out there. Identity protection has become a large-scale thing. Losing passwords, permissions for certain users, access to certain machines, people accessing certain accounts, making changes, have security risk, lost their password out in the dark web. These are things that we worry about. These are things that we have added for multiplying effect into the CrowdStrike system. This can be added to any of the customers needed. If you're worried about identities, if you've been worried, if you've been attacked, if you see it quite often, is a large scale thing that is occurring constantly. This is why we have added that to our platform to make sure that you're able to get that protection if you ever need it. Then we have the threat intelligence. This is real life situations. This means that threat intelligence is finding out there in the world before they get to you. This is how we're able to keep up with adversaries, keep up with different threats, keep up with different attacks. This will always be changing, as intelligence will not ever end. So we will be doing this for you. We will be gathering that. This will be out there protecting you with new detections, new information, documentations, and anything else that you may need if that is ever the case. This is how we are able to give you that protection. This is how TekStream will use us to help all its customers. Them being a master at our platform will be able to give you that extra edge against these new types of cyber threats. So simple as it goes there for our platform. With that being said, we will be now passing it on to Chris, who will be our Splunk expert and will give you the demonstration as needed.
Thanks, Roger. So I'm here to talk about where Splunk fits into this picture. And something to understand about Splunk is that while we have a Gartner Magic Quadrant leading SIEM, Splunk Enterprise Security, we're also built on this fundamental Splunk platform that is meant to bring data to everything. And really, it's data to everyone as well. We want to be able to bring in any data from any source, whether that's structured, unstructured, single lines, multi-lines, syslog, stack traces, metrics off sensors, any data that you can produce, we can get into Splunk. And once it's in Splunk, we can analyze it across either near real-time metric data as things come right off the wire, or look back across weeks, months, years worth of data to build trends and do predictive analytics. And when you can look at all this data and correlate it together across all these different time spans, we can use it to drive security goals, but also IT and operational goals, observability goals for DevOps teams, and then business analytics. Are we being successful? Whether that's a commercial business and the bottom line, or if it's public sector where I work, some of the mission-oriented goals. Are we actually meeting the goals that we've set out to meet? Serving citizens. And then after we manipulate this data, when we do all this analysis, what are we going to do with it? And we integrate with all sorts of other tools, like CrowdStrike and others to take action. So we have a whole slew of apps on Splunkbase, our app repository, to help you not just ingest data from different sources, but then take action with those other tools in your environment. So that if you need to, block a port on a firewall, add something to a threat intel list, or, we also have a very, very important app for ordering pizza from Domino's when you're stuck in a war room. So anything that has an API that we can attach to, there's probably a Splunk-based app to help you leverage that tool from your analytic engine. So that's kind of the Swiss Army knife part, the data to everything. But then sitting on top of that, is Splunk Enterprise Security. And rather than just saying there's security data here, come search it, Splunk Enterprise Security is set up to give you some really insightful views into what's going on in your environment by tracking certain metrics, key performance indicators, key security indicators across time. So you can see kind of what normal looks like in your environment. Lots of dashboards to give analysts quick and easy ways to visualize data and pivot, from one clue to the next during an investigation. And give you the context to help you identify whether a particular alert that came in, is this a false positive? Is this just the tip of the iceberg for some larger attack and intrusion? There's also a lot of content to detect different security events in your environment. Part of that comes from our enterprise security content updates that our security research team puts out on about a bi-monthly basis. Other security content that our surge team puts out, rapidly reacting to events. Just in the last 2 days, we put out maybe a dozen detection searches related to the log4j vulnerabilities, the log4shell exploit. And those are things that you can just pick up, copy from blog posts or some of our other packaging, and just immediately implement in enterprise security to help you detect new exploits. And that really ties back into some of the need to monitor your system holistically, because last week no one was monitoring for outgoing LDAP connections, but hopefully some folks that were using just network connection tracing for IT ops needs, or maybe looking at lateral movement, brute force attempts based on network connections. If they've got that data in Splunk already, we can immediately pivot to these new threats that are always going to be evolving. So having a good visibility in your whole environment lets you quickly pivot and do new things, because no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow. But we can give you that awareness to look back in time and say, I only found about this today, but I can look back in time and say, well, yep, last week someone was able to leverage that exploit in my environment. There's also a lot of views in there to help you prioritize incidents. So, we look at the severity of the alerts themselves, as well as the importance of the assets and identities that they're tied to. That just helps give an analyst a better view into what are the most critical things to address immediately. And finally, we have a lot of detections and a lot of different data you can manipulate in Splunk. And sometimes that can get overwhelming. I mean, lots of different, low level, to moderate level alerts can still lead to fatigue. And one of the ways we're addressing that now is with a more in-depth risk-based alerting. So what we've done is we've taken all these detections in Splunk and just, again, helped build that baseline of what normal looks like. There's always going to be some unusual things. There's always going to be login failures. There's always going to be odd things go on in any environment of any size. But if we can look at it at a higher level and say, when do I see a series of activities that I can relate together that are more likely to indicate an attack? We can either look at particular assets and say, a lot of suspicious things have happened on this server, let's investigate that. But we can also look kind of across the whole spectrum and say, when do I see a coordinated set of attacks that look like someone is moving across, the MITRE attack framework? Have they made it past that initial scan and then intrusion? Have they actually been able to exploit something on a system? And then do I see something like lateral movement? And if I can stitch together a whole series of alerts like that, and I can present an analyst, one group of alerts for one kind of coordinated attack, and then still give them all the rich data behind that to investigate and actually analyze what did happen and what other systems might be compromised. So we do give you some tools inside enterprise security to do that act and response, by pivoting between different data points, investigating with different dashboards that are already built for you. And then you can take individual actions to do specific functions. But to really kind of take that up a notch, that's where Splunk SOAR comes in, also known as Splunk Phantom, but Splunk SOAR is the new name going forward. SOAR meaning, of course, security, orchestration, automation, and response. So this gives us tools not just to take individual actions, but to do whole orchestrated series of actions. And this can take place at kind of any point in that incident response lifecycle. Some use cases that customers use Splunk SOAR for are doing all the nitty-gritty investigation before an analyst gets a packet to review. So if you have a potentially malicious file and you want to check it against VirusTotal, detonate it with FireEye, consult with threat intelligence you've gotten from CrowdStrike, those are all things that a human can swivel and do, but we can automate that initial part of the process and then either immediately take action based on what we discover, or just kind of do that legwork for your analyst and then present them the whole view into what your standard steps, your SOPs for a particular type of investigation are, hand it all packaged up neatly to your analyst. On the other end, we can take things and immediately run with them. So if you have some, rapid moving attack, seconds and minutes matter to get ahead of an attacker, we can take automatic actions to block IPs, quarantine devices, working with all the other security tools in your environment, we can immediately take action to prevent the spread of a malicious attack inside your network. Reducing the alert investigation times from 30 to 45 minutes to less than 1 minute, I mean, that's not just potentially a 30x savings, that could be 1,000x savings if that means we got ahead of the attackers. And then just for the more mundane things, dealing with phishing and malware investigations, if we can save your staff, 5 minutes of time per event that they're investigating, that results in less burnout for your staff, folks that are spending more time doing the interesting security hunting work and less time just gritting through the unfortunate never-ending deluge of tickets. So it leads to a more effective staff, faster response times, also gives folks the chance to be more consistent. So we can use Splunk SOAR to make sure that you're actually following your procedures, doing best practice work at all times, and able to actually document and prove it after the fact. So if you needed to take legal action potentially, the logs that we keep in SOAR can help document where your investigation went, what you did, and what happened. It's a great tool that's been very, very useful for many, many customers. So that's all I've got. I think it's time to pass it back to Bruce and let him talk about how TekStream can kind of put all these tools together with their services to
Thanks,
actually help you with your security operations.
Hey, thank you, Chris. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about how, these best of breed tools combine to make a best of breed solution for your security needs. So our MDR solution layers in on top of, obviously, the EDR and the SOAR and the Splunk SIEM platform and some of the other tools available from our partners. It is leveraging all of the security layers and appliances that you already have in place, and it really acts as a force multiplier on top of those. As a solution, all of our customers worry about malware, ransomware, and phishing. It's a given. But there are some customers that worry more about their LDAP environment and the security they're in, or have specific compliance needs because they're global entities operating in the EU, for instance, or they worry about their cloud security. Well, the ability to do all of the layers and not just where people will click is absolutely fundamental to a comprehensive MDR solution. For us, the processes that we support are kind of segregated into those processes that are up to seconds and minutes, again, where automation is key and where humans get involved for suspicious IOCs as opposed to the obviously malign or benign. Obviously malign and benign can be handled on an automated basis for the most part in level 1. Then follow up to that, which may be minutes and potentially days. Hopefully investigation isn't days, but in the case of a breach, it may be. Managing cases and reporting on those cases and the regular SLEs, again, those are tasks that we hand off and report on an automated basis daily. And then there are kind of longer running tasks relative to your maturity, where we constantly revisit the baseline that we established with our analysis up front, with our engagement with a customer, and we look at security assessment results on a quarterly basis to ensure, are we meeting our SLAs? Are we picking up too many false positives? Do we have new use cases to investigate? And, how are we doing and what do we need to do going forward? So it's kind of closed loop from that perspective. Every event yields some level of follow-up and investigation and an ongoing culture of improvement and collaboration. There are obviously ancillary processes relative to keeping up with tradecraft, layering in your compliance needs, potentially handling vulnerability scanning for you. The MSP solution, if we want to layer that in for owning the Splunk and AWS environments or AWS environments, and obviously support for your fraud department as well. All of those really are options that we layer into the core process. In terms of what we're going to look at today in the demo, we're going to look at really lateral movement, something that is process-based lateral movement, something that CrowdStrike really excels at on an endpoint. We're going to look at not just that layer, not just the endpoint layer, but we're going to transition into all the layers. So we're looking at the whole onion, if you will, instead of just the endpoints, so that within the SIEM and SOAR solution, we have a holistic view. We can pivot from user to host machine to file hash and process, which is very typical within the context of triage in the context of our investigation, and then respond to that, not just with phishing events that respond directly to EDR or CrowdStrike surface threats, but also threats that then are part of broader alerting frameworks within SIEM. And so obviously the sophistication of our response is commensurate with a variety of attacks. Just walling off an IP address may not be the optimal response. We want to understand from a triage perspective, where are we vulnerable, where are we at risk with a perceived threat. Obviously, we want to do a coordinated response and leverage each one of these tools, and we want kind of a centralized platform so we don't necessarily have to keep going from one screen to another. So we're going to look at, the attack signature in the context of MITRE. That seems to be the kind of go-to for all of our threat classification. We're going to look at reconnaissance, command and control, lateral movement, and data exfil types of activities or techniques. And that will be accomplished through kind of this simple scenario, if you will, an end user device that is, we're running Kali Linux to approximate the user command and control and lateral movement through a script, a PowerShell script that's running to facilitate that lateral movement. And then we're picking up with Splunk on an agency level with some of the other layers, network and firewall and so forth. and we're pulling that all together into the TekStream platform. So let's jump into the demo.
Please feel free to just interject if there is any question. Perfect. CrowdStrike platform, I'm sure that most of you are very familiar with it. You have this big overview where you are going to see everything that is going on and what is most important in your environment. Something that I want to take it to call your attention is the crowd score, because this crowd score will give you really visibility on your security posture, and it will give you a single and easy to understand metrics that will clearly communicate if there was anything going on, and also the severity. As you can see here, the crowd score over time will also tell you when those attacks took place, so you can have a better understanding what happened. Of course, you have the detections in here that will really show what happened. However, I want to take you over to CrowdScore. CrowdScore is going to be a place where we are going to bring all those different incidents. And in the difference between incidents and detections is that incidents will bring different type of detection that can be isolated in the analyst's eyes. However, they have something in common because, for example, the lateral movement. It will show you if one cyber criminal got into your environment and then directly from there went over and moved laterally. You have different tags and different searching options in here, but we are going to concentrate more in this demo on the lateral movement. And I think that there was question, and we can answer that. Chris asked, does the Splunk spoken about in the diagram integrate directly with CrowdStrike Splunk database, allowing the querying from Crowds?
I mean,
yeah.
I can kind of add a little color to that, Gren. The Splunk is leveraging the API directly to CrowdStrike. Although obviously CrowdStrike does employ the Splunk platform underneath that covers for some of its capabilities. There's a lot of algorithmic special sauce and intelligence that goes into CrowdStrike's solution. And we really want to, as you know, from Splunk perspective, as a SIEM, it really is a force multiplier. So it wants to kind of leverage the CrowdStrike platform, and therefore we use the API to get alerts or any of the messages that we need to expose.
Thank you. I hope that this answered your question, Chris. But we can go more in details when Mandy is going to go over the Splunk piece. But what I wanted to explain here is this attack, this incident summary. This incident summary will give us a lot of information about what happened, what hosts are involved, as well as all the user accounts and this incident timeline summary. On the same time, we have the possibility directly from here with a single click to directly restrict the network connectivity. And we are going to be able to contain all of this host directly. Basically, this will be one of the first steps when there is an incident going on, because directly from there, we are going to be able to restrict the connection. And then we can go more in this incident workbench, which will have different tabs to better understand what was going on. I personally prefer this graphical overview. I am most a person that like to understand what was going on. And you have in this view also different tools that will help you understand what was happening. You can replay the entire attack and you are going to see all those different processes, which one executed first, what they were trying to do. And when you see this attack tree, you are going to see what I was explaining earlier, that somebody opened Outlook and then from there was Word, a document that opened up and spent PowerShell. And then basically I went through to get some more information about where I am, what I can do, delete in here all the different application logs, or try to delete the shadow copies as well as move laterally. And then directly from that computer that I gained admin privileges, I was able to move laterally using the WMI created processes, or directly as well authentication connection. As you can see here, it will give you a lot of information about from what computer to what computer we moved laterally. You can directly connect to host using the real-time response, network contain one or the other computer, and as well have an understanding about every event that happened. What process started? What is the process name? The command lines of each and every processes. You can as well here filter to directly go into network operation, what this specific application connected, what the PowerShell, the activity of the PowerShell for the network operations, and so on. Those different tabs that you have open in the bottom will help you really pinpoint what is most important for you, and then also really concentrate on this, use it as a workbench, concentrate on what is most important, and better understand the entire attack life cycle as well.
Thank you, Gren, for stepping up for Rick, for doing the demo piece. I appreciate it. We're going to move from CrowdStrike now into the Splunk side of the equation, Splunk SIEM and SOAR. You know, they're equal halves of the OODA loop, if you want to put it in that context, the observe, orient, decide, and act process for threat response, incident response. The SIEM side of the house, the Splunk side of the house, enterprise security is, you know, observe and orient for the most part. There are things that we can automate in this context. We'll go over from that perspective as well. But for us, obviously, response is all about the SOAR side of the equation. Over the past year or so, CrowdStrike has become definitely a first-class citizen in the Splunk world for sure, and so it's a part of you know, the majority of our MDR or security environments for when we're doing you know, security work as TekStream, and it is fundamentally a little bit better integrated into Splunk. So you can see here the wide variety of apps that are supported from Splunk. On the first one on the drop down, the CrowdStrike Falcon is kind of the landing page, the consolidated dashboard around Falcon events. Data Replicator and the Data Replicator S3 downloads details around the Falcon events, the history there. And the S3 version obviously allows you to take it and dump it into an S3 and use SQS for any notifications for new events. The Devices app allows us to kind of explore Falcon devices, anything with basically an agent on them. And obviously, if you have Falcon Insight or Falcon Prevent, are the products that allow us to do remote control to those devices and manipulate them remotely, as long as the agent is there. Falcon Event Streams allows us to do kind of the core audit and event data through the Event Streams API. You actually have to enable the Event Streams API through support, CrowdStrike support. It's not enabled by default. And then Spotlight is obviously the vulnerability stuff from CrowdStrike. So, you know, a lot of touch points. Also integration into Falcon, which will into Phantom, which we'll touch on in a minute. Security posture. There are actually some new options for security posture that, you know, give us SOC operations for assignment summaries and then executive dashboards, if you will, for seeing overall security. And the security posture is 3 basic summary dashboards. Not a lot of data here. It's a demo environment, but we basically set this up to do pen testing every once in a while, or in this case, to provide an endpoint for CrowdStrike events. The dashboards are a great management view of our overall threat surface. We kind of focus a little bit more on incident response or incident review. In the context of incident review, then we've got you know, a couple of different, if you're familiar with enterprise security, a couple of different types of notable events. Notable being the term for anything that is as suspicious in the Splunk world, or any kind of threat that is worth reviewing, potential threat that's worth reviewing. So there are kind of these normal, like detect rare executables or CrowdStrike possible lateral movement on PowerShell, you know, that give the details of a specific notable event. And then there's also kind of this attack threshold So, for instance, there are MITRE attack, what's termed risk-based alerts in Splunk Enterprise now, which we use pretty extensively to filter out false positives. Basically, the idea is that although rare executables is absolutely something we want to pop up to get someone's attention, there are a ton of like underlying risk-related detailed events that happen in our environment every day. That in and of themselves may not constitute a threat. So if somebody logs into a box for the first time, somebody does something that looks like brute force because they were denied too many times, or they do lateral movement to a new box, or privilege escalation, much like in the context of our demo, those actions taken cumulatively are suspicious. Individually, they're not really. They're not something that I would want to respond to. But for instance, in our demo environment, credential access, lateral movement, execution, privilege escalation. When you take all of those in sum total, along with their metadata around their MITRE tactics and techniques, you do all of that activity at one time from one user, one threat object with user host, doesn't really matter. Then we can cumulatively score over a certain period of time anything that looks like risky behavior and then collectively act on that. So definitely filter around false positives. It changes fundamentally how Splunk works because you're not as worried about filtering out the granular events. You're more focused on what do I surface anything that looks suspicious, and I don't have to react to that except in a consolidated risk type of search result. So that's essentially what we're doing here with that suspicious machine is we're looking at all of the collective risk, the collective actions that represent a threat, and passing that on. And of course, you can take individual CrowdStrike events and make them notable events and pass those. We most often do because most of the alerts from CrowdStrike are actionable, but you don't want those to populate twice. Like there's an underlying data model. You don't necessarily want to have those included in the data model and then show up in that context. So we're constantly kind of looking at what searches, what risks are worth paying attention to, and what is just cumulative detailed activity. So when we look at any one of these, attack threshold, for instance, you can see there's details about each one of the threats, and we can take actions at a detailed level, but then at a macro level, we can add this to an investigation. Typically, we really only do this anymore when we want to record our triage information. So maybe we'll take this, and it's typical like on a day one threat. And with a day one threat, then we're not sure. Like recently, we had the Okta scare. We're not really sure what IOCs are being published. Maybe they're not coming from the vendor. So we just really want to search across any of the indicators and start to pivot between endpoint data and network data risk. Start to pivot between the assets and identities that are involved. And start to record what it is we're finding for each one of these. And that's a very useful tool when you're just doing kind of the Uber grep pivot kind of search for security response. In most often, what we're really focused on is taking any notable event and then running an adaptive response to send it to Phantom. And so for us, that is kind of the decide and act part of the OODA loop, where we're actually making events actionable. And we'll send it to SOAR. This is usually programmatic for any of our notables, but of course I can elect to do that manually. I can elect to send it off to SOAR, and actually that would be RVA. Sorry. I can use tags to drive how I'm going to respond, what playbook I want to respond with, and so that will run then in our SOAR environment. And if I bring up SOAR, I can see I've got a few of these 24-hour risk threshold exceeded. This actually, in most cases, runs like a composite playbook, composite process, and I can drill down on any of the artifacts or indicators and respond to those. All of the, as you're familiar with SOAR, everything that is within, it's really just a workflow tool for security for the most part. And so there is, in addition to kind of the risk-based playbooks and some of the kind of standard handling of those composite security events, we have new CrowdStrike playbooks that have really a starting event or a starting template, if you will, for a process to respond to a CrowdStrike threat. So in this case, I'll start with an event from the CrowdStrike API, which is integrated here. In fact, let me show that real quick. The CrowdStrike app has a variety of processes exposed. We've got 45 actions that you can do. So it's more than simply a passive threat list type of interaction that you would have which is typical within a playbook. But there are also kind of, active like quarantine device or unquarantined device things that you can actually do to, more directly alter your incident response. And I think in the playbook, actually in the playbook template, yeah. So what this playbook, if you look at it, has, get the indicator from CrowdStrike and then look for file hashes or URL, and then gather all that to format to the user. And then the user decides, do I quarantine a device, for instance? So again, this is a starting point. It is very much a shell process. The real processes for us look a little bit more like this, a little bit more complex, with a lot of breakpoints actually for users over and above, because some of these actions are quite intrusive and quite dramatic. So we like to set breakpoints with our customers, particularly in an MDR context, for when we take dramatic action, there's some kind of an acknowledged response, some kind of approval that we can move forward with it. That, in a nutshell, is what is new with CrowdStrike and with Splunk. And obviously, we rely upon both of those, among other tools, for an overall security solution if we're in the process of outsourcing someone's SOC. They both have extremely valuable but very different purposes in terms of threat detection and response. So what you saw today was essentially, pretty common scenario for all of you that are dealing with data exfil. There are obviously within the MITRE attack framework multiple points that we could have picked up on this threat, and we surfaced those and walked through those. Want to get it obviously as early as possible. And we want to stop the threat on an automated basis as early in the life cycle as possible. So the combination obviously of EDR and the more comprehensive view from a SIEM facilitates pretty comprehensive coverage of your threat surface. Relative to maturity, one of the things that we focus on with our kind of ongoing processes are really three measures: visibility, fidelity, and automation. Obviously, with new threats every day and with new data sources and new security appliances that we're adopting, visibility tends to grow over time. So that is definitely never static. Fidelity is one of those things can always be improved upon. Nobody has zero false positives in their environment. There's always kind of tuning either from the way in which we're applying risk algorithms, as with Splunk risk-based alerting, which we covered in the demo, or with higher fidelity, maybe machine learning searches to weed out those kind of simple heuristics. And then obviously automation is absolutely key in terms of being able to respond and increase the effectiveness of our security analysts. And this is something that we measure over time. So in terms of getting started with Splunk MDR, we have kind of the standard platform implementation, which begins with security assessments, and security assessments can differ depending upon the threat surface that we're supporting, and is something, as I said, we revisit on a regular basis, every quarter at least. And then we go into a quick stream process. We recognize that there is a certain level of shakeout, if you will, with any of these environments. We get to be a part of your team, and we're privileged to understand your business processes and those types of things that constitute a threat. There might be a variety of email domains that are legitimate. There might be a variety of processes that are legitimate, and certainly secure areas that you're more sensitive about. We learn that over time, and we kind of build that into a 90-day shakeout period with our quick stream that allows us to increase fidelity and increase the fit, if you will, of the processes, templated processes that we implement within SOAR. And then MDR obviously is our ongoing relationship together, and we enjoy a 97% renewal rate with our customers. So once we start working together, we feel pretty successful at becoming an effective and intrinsic part of your team. So that's it really. our ability to support you in whatever challenges you might have with Splunk, cover the full gamut, the full life cycle, from being able to provide the software and the licenses therein directly to you or as a part of our MDR service, being able to provide any number of services to implement those solutions, support those solutions through MDR or managed services, and then find you people that know Splunk. Any problem that you have with any of these technologies, we're here to support you. And with that, we can kind of end our webinar. Thank you for attending. Have a great day.